All right, our last speaker of the night is Dr. Kevin Vilaca. Kevin is a veterinarian and a partner at Southwest. Kevin holds a master's degree in epidemiology and leads our flu monitoring team. He'll be providing us with an update on influenza in Ontario.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me in the back? Perfect. I stand between you and supper, so I'll try to make this quick. Today, I'm going to have the honor of talking to you about influenza. And probably the biggest change that's come with this is, unlike Greg, I probably don't have the best news for you because it's something that's new. However, I think I'll end it with something where we did get to a better news story at the end. Before I go on, I'm the one up here presenting, but at the end of the day, this is actually taken from a whole group of people. So we've got our vets out on the road. We've actually got our production staff, which there'd be too many for me to put up here. And they're the ones that actually do a lot of the collection for some of the stuff that allows us to put this data here. So without them, none of this is possible. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So what we've got, and some of you are aware of this, we've got a surveillance program. And this really came about in 2016. We'd had all the influenza stuff that happened in 2005 when we got our first changes in the province. And then the dreaded swine flu that came through in 2009, the pandemic, and we went into hibernation. And so we didn't do diagnostics. And we actually took a significant step back in the understanding of influenza. But 2016 changed. We realized that we've got some things going on. We need to better understand it. And it's at that point that we started a surveillance program, which has blossomed into what it is today. And that's realistically where we got to, where today there is a robust surveillance program that is run by our vets in production. It's a passive system, which means if you call us out and you're having coughing pigs or someone's on farm doing something else and they see it, they will swab. Those samples will then come back to the office where we'll then do further testing, PCR. Every single one of those that is positive gets sequenced and gets added to the database. And what this all means is that we have a pulse of what is going on with influenza within our province, and probably one of the most robust ones that there is out there. All of these come across my desk. There's a group of people, we call it the the flu team, and Ken and I usually are the ones that get most of it first. We take a look and we're basically looking to see what did you get, what did it come out with, and then actually report back. And Adriana and Ken fill those out and give you a report back on what's your virus, what did you have. And for us, Ken and I will sit down quite often in the morning and go through what's come through, what's changed, is it different, is it the same? And that's the basis of it. It's ongoing surveillance that is going on an everyday basis as things come through. And what has really happened is we look for that so we can see what's coming, but also so we can update the regional vaccine. 2019, we got our first regional flu vaccine into the province, and this is the benchmark behind it. This is the backbone that allows us to do the updates to it. And over time, we've seen a few different things. I mentioned the 2016, that's when H1N2 first came into the province. Probably one of our most dominant strains that we see currently. 2020, so not that far ago, we had an H3N2 that also started deviating, and these are all updates that we add in. And then the reason I'm here, and this is a new H3N2 that showed up this spring. So beginning of April, call comes through, and pigs are coughing, they're getting hit pretty hard, and sample comes back. Same process, expecting it to be something. And I remember it coming through, and I went into Ken's office and said, oh, this is different. We've got to take a look and see what it is, because it was pretty hard. Speaking to the veterinarian that was out there, yep, those pigs got hit really hard, but sometimes we have that. And what jumped out to us was when we got the sequence back, it's 85% not similar to anything, or similar is 85%. So we had 15% differences between it and the next closest ones that we had. This is a big change in the numbers. And then if you can see in the back across that chart at the bottom, so we've got our top yellow line, that's one of our regional viruses that's in there, quite prevalent around. And then there's another yellow one which is got a PA, it's a Pennsylvania strain. This is a reference strain from the US. and it is almost a perfect match. And on percent homology and other things, it matches. This shows you in the different letters what antigenic sites are. It's a fancy way of saying the little spike proteins on the virus, this is what the immune system sees. Influenza changes those, and that's how it evades the immune system. So when these spike proteins change, we get different viruses. One change, we don't like it so much. Two, we start going, I don't know how well it is. You start getting three or more, it's not doing anything. It is completely different, and that's what this one is. So what happens over the next 7 weeks? Well, it wasn't just one. 12 more cases start to emerge, and it's coming up quick and hard and fast. And again, some of the things that we're looking at, the homology, so how similar it is to what else we're seeing. It's not similar to anything else, but to themselves, very tight, very well conserved. New cases that are showing up, and we started looking into these and tracking them and doing some epidemiology of what is it that we're seeing in these different viruses. And then the geography, I'll show you a map of as these emerged, and it was very diverse. It wasn't all in one geographical cluster. And then the other one, the clinical signs. So these were quite severe. This was presenting as a new outbreak with no background immunity in these cases. And then probably the one of most concern is this is a virus we already knew about. So it's a strain very similar. I alluded to it with that Pennsylvania strain. It's not that it's only in Pennsylvania, it's actually the dominant strain in the US. What you see in the top corner, those yellow shaded in areas, and this is where I say it's well conserved. For those of you that look at these, anywhere from 100% similarity to the other ones, these are all the other viruses in the same group, to 99.4. That's hardly any change realistically. This is very, very tight. It's the same virus, it's moving. I showed you the one underneath here, and when we start comparing it, again, that one from the US. So this is Iowa State. This is data that they put out. Don't know how well the colors look out, but realistically what happened is this virus, they've called it 2010.1. It originally showed up in the human population in 2010, was in the human seasonal influenza vaccine, and then within a couple of years actually jumped into pigs. It took a few years, and depending on the state, some states got affected more than others, but by 2017 had established itself as the dominant strain in the US. This is across all the US, not just Iowa State. There's a little dip down there in COVID because there wasn't much submissions, but really still to this day is the dominant strain in the US. So those that look at flu knew this has been in the US, and we've actually been saying, when's it gonna get here? Well, when it arrived, we kind of knew it was here. So not new to us, but not new in the US. And actually quite impressive that it hadn't made it up here in that amount of time. 2021, there's a research paper, anyone that really wants to see, they actually go through, characterize this virus, so it's gotten a lot of attention in the US as to what it does, its genetic changes, where it's got. So anyone that wants to geek out, this is a great paper for it. What did we see? So this is our internal data that we've got, and you see that steady spike. So this is cumulative data that's come in. And we've got that H1N2, that's the blue bar. It still shows up, it's still our other, prior to this, a dominant strain. This is taken through the spring, late spring into summer, when actually influenza is usually at its lowest. If you took out the red bar, the rest of them would be about there. They're there, we get some cases, but it's not our common disease for the summertime. October, it starts ramping up all the way through winter. So our fall and spring, late winter are when influenza is usually at its highest. So we're seeing cases at very high rates. Spoke to Davor Wojciech, so he's the virologist at University of Guelph, huge resource in this. He does the sequencing for us. And this was, I think, as of July, end of July, they'd had 57 cases. Of those, 73%, this is all influenzas, were this one strain. Of the H3s, so you've got H1s, H3, there's a few categories, this virus made up 85% of it. So the other H3s that we're seeing really weren't present. It is the dominant strain that it is coming in, and it has escalated. I spoke to him yesterday on something, and he's been away, and so he summarized the last 3 weeks. There's been, just in the last 3 weeks, there have been 12 more cases in Ontario. So although this settled a little bit in August, The September data seems to be it's ramping up. So what does it look like in a herd? Anyone that's had an acute break, it's sudden onset of coughing. That's usually the first complaint. If it's a sow barn, you'll end up having sows off feed. That's usually your common one. Abortions do happen with influenza. The key here is keeping the fever from prolonged days. A day of a high fever won't cause damage. You start getting multiple days. That elevated temperature is actually what will cause a lot of them to abort. So we do see abortions that will be in it. But it's the off feed. Depending on where that takes place, if they're in farrowing, you have a downstream effect on piglet quality because mom isn't milking, she's not eating. Previous vaccination didn't work, and we're not surprised. I showed you some of the genetic information. There isn't cross-protection from other, what we'd have even the regional vaccine or any of the commercial ones. It is completely different, so I'm not surprised. It presents as a new outbreak. Growing pigs, very similar. Sudden onset, coughing, off feed. One of our vets, Clint, went out to a barn and was amazed as how sick these pigs can get. And, you know, I walked into one where literally you go in and they don't want to lift up. They lift up their head, they look at you, and they put it back down. For a couple of days, they feel really dumpy. Now, is that in every case? No, but it can be quite severe if they've got no immunity attached to it. And then, of course, there's increased use of antibiotics. How do we do it? Well, we're trying to reduce fevers depending on the stage. And if they get secondary infections, we're having to use antibiotics. So our antibiotic use does increase. I mentioned the map, and this is probably the part we were watching this early on. You can't see it, but right out here, right in the center is where we've got case 1, 2, and 3 were the first ones to show up. So at first it looked like there was geographical proximity, but I want to say it was 60 some odd kilometers between case 1 and case 2, which is a significant difference in the spread of these. So it doesn't look very far here, but as we start going, well, case 4 jumps out close to by the lake. Case 5 moves around up. So we're not seeing a similarity that we're going, this isn't a geographical distribution. And so where we start getting, and we start looking at this point is we said, okay, we're going to do an epidemiological breakdown. Those cases, who are the genetic suppliers? Who are the truckers? What are the pig flows? These are not connected to pig flow. That's the other thing. It's not even like I broke and I sent it down to barns. We just assume that those got it. And we start seeing it quite widely distributed. This isn't a normal regional pattern for distribution for what's going. Those are pig dense areas for sure. Is there aerosol spread? There sure is. We know that influenza has been recorded going up to 9 kilometers that they've recorded, and in the field, much further than that. So, you know, if you get the right air patterns, 9 kilometers means nothing. Look at yourselves and go, how close am I with, how many farms can I put within 9 kilometers of my farm? Pick up wind in any direction because it changes, there's going to be lots. So what do we do with this information? I think we're at the start of where we would be in an outbreak situation, and this has actually gotten a fair bit of attention. I've given this presentation for Quebec last week, but even into other provinces and government to varying degrees, because this has raised quite some concerns and interest. Again, it's not an alarming to the degree of what they had. This has been in the US. It's not something new. It's new to us, but it's not that it's a completely new thing. So it allowed us to get early detection. So the early discussions that we had got us going that by June we were wanting to do something about it. But I would say that we're on the cusp of what will be an outbreak, and because we were seeing it through the summer. And I think that's the, you know, the unfortunate, not to be the Debbie Downer at the end of the night, but it's coming. If the US increase was the way it is, this is going to move, and it's probably going to move into other provinces as well. And some of that we can get from what we anticipate from US spread. And speaking to some of the colleagues in the US, that's sort of how it moved within their provinces. Doesn't appear that there's any herd immunity currently. The way it's moving through herds, definitely doesn't seem it's there. And we're concerned about what's coming in October. And it's at this point that, you know, as veterinarians or as government, we've got choices. How do we intervene and how do we try to reduce something? And ultimately, why do we have all this? So we can be preventative. And it's acting now, and it's on a larger scale than just us. So that's what we did. May, within a few weeks, we organized ourselves, gathered our details, And we set up a meeting with CFIA and actually presented this to CFIA. And our goal was to have a concurrent approach. So if we take our normal regional strain, how we do our regional autogenous vaccines, right now 6 strains, we apply to CFIA, we make a test batch, it gets manufactured, takes 12 weeks. We put it into animals. This is where optimization of the 6 strains so that we get immune response to all 6, not just one more than the other. So there's some optimization. Those all get put into animals, results come back, and we send it to CFIA. They then read over it, approve it, and with manufacturing, they could have a vaccine available with all the approval process by January. October's looming ahead of it, and that's not soon enough. So our ask then at that point is, well, how about something different? Can we apply for something that's never been done and apply for an emergency vaccine? And this is what we proposed to them. Can we do a single strain vaccine that would give us immunity to this one? The rest aren't our dominant ones. We've done single strain vaccines for a long time. We know the efficacy. We know what they do. We don't have to worry about optimizing it because there's other strains in there. We just have to do it for one. Can they follow basically the first part of that process there, give us an emergency status so that we can get herds immunized? And they saw the need for it and gave it to us. And vaccine arrived at the beginning of September. And that sped it up. And it's allowing it so that anyone that wants it and that's available to use it has it available to put into their sow herds and give them immunity for what may be coming down in the fall. And ultimately, what's the goal? The goal is to be, can we actually be proactive, which we've done. We go to CFIA and ultimately be preventative. What have we got? So like I said, we've put this into animals. So we did some initial trials when it first came in. Was it going to be reactive? It's the same as what we've had in our other vaccines, other than the adjuvants we use are the same, other than it's just got one strain. It's got this one. So put it into pregnant animals. That was going to be the biggest concern if there was, and have had no reactions to any of those animals. We did temperatures on them. So at this point, we've got no reason to think it's going to be any different. And add to it that over 50,000 animals have already been vaccinated to date with no reactions that have been reported. So we are going to be doing some of the further animal testing on immunogenicity. Given what it's done in the past, we've got no reasons to be concerned that it won't create an immune response, but that is where we're at. And the goal is to get sow herd inventory so that as many animals can be immunized ahead of what may be coming. What's a crystal ball? And that is basically almost the end for me. I think if we look at it, we're in a unique situation where we've got a surveillance program in place. Speaking to some of the other provinces, they don't have something like this. So they're actually not aware of where they're at. They depend on their university, and it gives them updates every 6 months, every few months, and it isn't dynamic enough. So most of them are actually looking at communicating with someone in Quebec on setting something up on a more regular basis for them. They've got a surveillance program. It's done every 6 months. And they're looking at going to something on a more, it's labor intensive, but can get it there. I think we're on the cusp of an outbreak, and we've sent virus to Winnipeg, and then University of Guelph has this virus, as well as out in Saskatchewan. Quebec has requested it as well so that they can optimize their tests for detection. Most of them are ramping up for when it does come. Will their current tests be able to find it? If we put it all together, I said I was going to end with a positive note. This is a good news story for the industry. We've been able to have a system that works. We've got a surveillance program that looks for things, identifies it early, engages the groups that have to, communicated, lobbied a fair bit with CFIA. This was something that took a bit for them to get to, and we're able to put a solution in place that is available. And that's what the system's supposed to be. This is a good news story. Surveillance, actions, and prevention. That's what we want to end up being. So I'll thank, there's a bunch of people here. CFIA, they get a bad rap. We've had a good relationship with them. They have their policies, they have their procedures. But if you explain things and you talk to them and you put it in the right way, they've been open-minded enough to look at this. And it takes a fair bit, but they've got their procedures. And they saw this. This is usually it's tick boxes. We follow this. It deviates from this. No, it's a no. But they saw the need for it. But it took explaining and educating and going through what's in place to get them there. I already alluded to Davor Wojciech. Davor is great. Virologists are a little quirky, but he's awesome to work with. He loves these bugs and is a phenomenal brain. Omafra, we've got a group, like I said, the sequencing that's done is covered off by Omafra, so it doesn't cost you to do the sequencing. It's just got to then be put together and analyzed. That's the bigger step. Other provinces don't have that. And so we are very fortunate. Next time you see your Omafra representative, say thank you, because this is a huge part of it. The vets and staff, without them, the ongoing surveillance wouldn't happen. And that's key to this. None of this happens if we don't know what's going on out there. And then I call my flu team here, but it's the people really behind here that need the applaud. Ken, Lori, Guy, Courtney, Jordan, and Adriana. With that, that's it for me. Open to any questions, folks.
Generally, like as an industry, we're a pretty reactive industry, so it's nice to see that we're proactive on this. So good job, I'd say. But in the whole time I've been a producer, like these bugs have evolved, our influenza's evolved, PRRS has evolved, our biosecurity has evolved, but it almost feels like we're no farther ahead than we were 15 years ago. Like, where is there a better model or a different way to approach problems like this? Like, are any other countries having success with disease-free hogs or influenza-free hogs, mycoplasma-free hogs, or just deleting it from the industry as a whole? Or where do you see these problems going in the next 15, 20 years?
Great question. So this actually was modeled over the human program. So the seasonal flu that you would get or that goes around would be very similar to this. There's an ongoing surveillance program that they would follow, and they're sampling on a regular basis. And in March, they come up with whatever they're going to vaccinate us with come usually September, because they've got to get manufacturing and going. This would be probably the model that seems to be working the best. Influenza, we're fortunate. There's millions and billions of dollars on a global basis spent on influenza. And this is the best that they've got. And this actually is probably where more is going to start getting modeled. And more farms and more provinces in the US, speaking to some vets actually in Europe, they're trying to set up something similar where they're actually follow the human model. The human model has been probably one of the greatest successes in public health for the young and the old, which in the humans, that's our most vulnerable, is the very young and the very old for influenza. It's a virus that mutates. They've put, again, much more money than they would because of pigs. We just get to piggyback on it. And unfortunately, I wish there was something better. Technology has allowed us. So what we now know on the sequencing, just a few years ago, interpreting sequence results, the antigenic sites, all of that is what's allowed us to even be able to do this. Prior to that, I remember when I first started, you could tell it was an H1 or an H3. That was about the best that we were getting to. And now the technology, you can get a sequence done for $130. It's cheap in the big scheme of things compared to what it would have been way back. I wish I had a better answer. Is there something else to do? But this actually is one of the best systems that's been in place and has, from the human side, been a great model in success if you can get enough of the population vaccinated, because the vaccines are protective from that point of view. Does that sort of answer your question? Probably not what you wanted to hear, but it mutates at such a high rate. That's part of the challenge.
So Kevin, I have two questions. The first one is the herds that are already using this, are they using this new vaccine in conjunction with the other Southwest vaccine?
Yes, so if we look at it, the way we're recommending it at this point is at least a double dose to start with of this strain at least. So if you put it as a minimum, if you want protection, Because it's a 2-dose vaccine, needs to be boosted. So get their first dose, follow up, get their second one, and then they have protection for that specific strain. So the monovalent one strain will cover it. If you're currently using the 6-way, there's ways to combine that depending on your vaccination protocols. I'd speak to your vet. Most are still using it. Those other strains are still there. They're not going to suddenly go away. If we look at our prevalence, October usually ramps up. This will dominate, but even if you look at the chart I had, the other ones are still there even through summer. So those other viruses, we have 5 other viruses that circulate just fine on a regular basis in Ontario. They're still going to be there. Come January, they'll all be there, but for now, it's catching those ones.
Okay, so my second question is, are you still working with the CFIA to be able to join this for January so that it's 1 dose?
Yeah, so they've approved. So that's they've approved it. So we're going through that whole top line process. So that's already in the works. So we did those concurrently. So at the same time as we applied for the single strain, the others are in. Actually, we've got that's being put into animals now for that initial optimization and testing. So that is still on track for January. There might be some delays, but right now that's the normal process that they have. So there will be something come January that will have all 6. It's just to cover it for now.
If that isn't combined with all the strains in January, do we have to do another booster with the single?
So if you look at influenza immunity is probably at its peak where you've got good lactogenic immunity, so what's carried on to piglets and colostral immunity. It's about 5 months. So timing will actually not be too bad that your booster will be once the regional comes in with the 6-way in January. If all your sows and gilts have received their double dosing and they've had the other ones, it will just continue on. So it'll just be, yeah, they've given us 4 months to use this to have the monovalent. By that point, they'll either extend it if we have to, but I don't see there being a delay. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. Kenny, sorry I didn't say that out loud. He'll curse me, but it should be here January. Ken's question was comments on using monovalent on gilts. So the key to this is until January. So if you do your blitz right now, get your herd done today, follow up in 3 weeks, they would have immunity. They've gotten their 2 doses. However, between now and then, you're probably going to get some loads of gilts that are going to come in. They will still need it twice to gilts. So your replacement gilts will still need it twice. That allows, Tony, to your question, come January, you just hop in because they've already gotten it twice. The strains and the rest of it is still the same. You just continue. Just continue. So the regional one in January won't need to be boosted twice on that one. And if there's any questions, speak to your herd veterinarian because there's different protocols, different timings. They can adjust it. Again, there's not one size that fits all.
Any other questions for Kevin? Good. Thank you, Kevin.